Hi, and welcome to another outdoor rec training session with Beyond Wilderness. Today, we're going to be looking at the potential effect of different technologies. Now, when a lot of people think about technology, they tend to think about digital technology. And that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of technology goes into the outdoor recreation industry. And some of that technology, or quite a bit of that technology, goes into the travel aspect of outdoor rec. So we're going to look at that today, and in particular, we're going to look at boots. So much of outdoor rec is based on walking. And so the logical place for us to start is to look at the technology that goes into boots or shoes, footwear, and then we can actually choose the right type of technological design for the situation we're in. Because if you choose the wrong type, it can have quite a big effect. It can actually almost be disastrous if you're wearing the wrong boots in the wrong place for an extended period of time. So first of all, we're going to look at your common walking boot. So this sort of boot is basically your stock standard walking boot. It's leather, it's quite thick, and it clearly has good ankle support. So there's some good advantages to that. The leather is strong and can be waterproofed. And because it's quite stiff leather, it gives good ankle support, particularly if you're wearing a pack and you have extra weight on your back and extra strain on your ankles. So that's a good advantage. So another good advantage is it's got quite a stiff sole, okay? Boots like this used to have a metal shank in them to give them stability. Nowadays, they've got a polyurethane liner, which goes all the way along to stiffen it up. What's the advantage of that? Well, one, it holds its shape and it tends to strike the ground with a nice rock. So as you're walking, it makes it easy to get that rhythm. Another advantage is you're not going to hurt your foot if you tread on the edge of a rock. It's quite well supported by a thick polyurethane liner on the inside, on the sole, so you can tread on sharp rocks and not hurt your feet too badly. So that's another advantage. And another advantage of these is deep grip for walking in mud, which you can see, been doing. So these sorts of technological advantages make these good for snow or really rugged hikes where you're going to be walking over rocks, rough paths with a heavy pack for an extended period of time. Disadvantages are these are heavy, okay? And when the leather gets wet, it can take a while to dry a boot like this out. So the extra weight on your feet, as well as if they did get quite wet, it takes a long time. You're going to have a wet boot for quite a while. They're not just going to dry overnight. So there are definitely some disadvantages. And one more disadvantage is the leather generally needs to be broken in, okay? Because it can be quite stiff and you can get blisters if you don't break it in. So these are a good common boot for bushwalking. Let's say at the other end of the scale, something that would be inappropriate for bushwalking. Dunlop Volley. So if you compare this to the other boot, okay, not a lot of stability in a Dunlop Volley. Okay, I have seen people wear these on a bushwalk, and I would not recommend you do that ever, really. There's no stability. If you did happen to tread on something sharp, the sole is very soft, okay? And you'll basically do your foot an injury by wearing something that's this soft in the sole. And particularly if you're carrying a pack, there is no ankle support here. Your pack could be 15 kilos up to 20 kilos, depending on your size. And you've got a lot of extra weight on your ankles and on your feet. And these don't give you any support. So lovely shoe to kick around in. They're light, they're comfortable, but not a great bushwalking shoe. So I wouldn't really recommend one of these. Another option is a hiker. So this happens to be a leather one, that you'll often find that these are canvas as well. And these are lighter than, say, this boot. The advantage of these is that there's no ankle support, but the weight, the ease of putting them on and off, and they do still have quite good grip. But your primary advantage is they don't weigh a ton. They are easier to dry out. And these are great for maybe easy day walks. They are okay for overnight walks with a pack as well. And you'll often find this with a canvas finish rather than a leather finish. However, they do get wet. The canvas will get wet, even these get wet. They're not really waterproofed, and certainly with a lower ankle, any water will be getting in them. So they will get wet easier, whereas these would be fine even in snow. The next level up from a hiker like that, or sorry, next level in terms of lightness, is something like this. It's a runner. Now they do make specific trail runners, and this is not a trail runner. The trail runners have a much more aggressive sole. Now the advantage of a trail runner over trail hiker is, once again, it's lighter. I have seen people do full bushwalks in these. They get wet really easily, but they do dry out quickly. They don't give much ankle support, but particularly a trail runner is designed for day walks, or even literally running the trail with a really light pack, and you're moving fast. So fast moving day walks or even half day walks where you've got a light pack and you're doing it for exercise. These are good for day walks, some overnight walks where it's not too rough a terrain, and these are really best for certainly wet conditions, overnight walks where you're carrying a large pack, and yes, they're heavier, but they do provide good foot protection and stability to your ankle. So we've got these 3 levels here. These are quite a bit warmer too, because if your feet get wet and you're in snow, your foot's going to get really cold. So there is an advantage of thermal protection in this one. Now, if we keep going up in levels, we'll put these 2 aside. There is some certainly technological advancement and thought put into a mountaineering boot. Now, these are specifically designed for snow. Okay, they are much warmer and much thicker. These ones are a leather mountaineering boot as opposed to a plastic mountaineering boot, so the liner is not removable. However, they do have these attachments on each end where you can put crampons on, and that way, once you've got a crampon on, you can walk on ice or even ice climb, and effectively it attaches to your boot and it won't pop off if attached appropriately. The ankle is much higher, but the boot is a lot heavier, and it is no flex. This sole won't flex at all, and that is quite deliberate and shouldn't change over time, because when you have a crampon on it and it goes into the ice, you need to be able to lever down on it, and if the boot flexed, it'd pop out of the crampon. So we've got boots that don't flex for that very reason. So these are a good technical ice climbing boot, and I've worn them in Canada in -22 and my feet were still warm. They're quite a warm boot. Once again, the next level up is a plastic boot. Okay, now this is a plastic cross-strain ski boot. It is very similar to a plastic mountaineering boot. Okay, except this one can go into a set of skis for backcountry skiing. You can put a crampon on these as well, and it is quite a bit warmer than even this boot. It's got a thick liner inside which can be removed, and it helps to dry the liner out. They are plastic, so the outer is plastic, and it still has some grip on the bottom, but because they're plastic, they are heavier and not as flexible. So these are great in skis and they give great ankle support, but by the end of the day, you know you've been wearing a heavy plastic boot. But the advantage is your feet are warm, and you've got good stability in snow, and you can add things like skis or crampons onto these boots. A plastic mountaineering boot is very similar to this, except it's a bit more flexible. It's somewhere between this one and this one. You can add a crampon to it, but you can't put a standard mountaineering boot into a set of skis to do backcountry skiing in. Now, there's a pretty clear difference between this shoe and this one. So you can imagine the potential effects of these 2 different technologies, or the 2 different technological designs of these. Wearing something like this, where you might wear something like this, is just not going to be appropriate. It would ruin your trip. And certainly wearing something like this on a rough bushwalk would also potentially ruin your trip, because a simple impact to your foot would mean that you can't complete your trip. So there's all sorts of potential effects depending on which technology you choose. Now, there is something worth keeping in mind. When you get to a campsite, you always might want a shoe or a sandal like this to give your feet a break from any of these shoes. So there's certainly advantages in having a pair of Dunlop Volleys or sandals that on a campsite. So once you get there, you've got something comfortable just to wear around the site when you're not doing rugged bushwalking. That's where these are appropriate. Now, it's up to you what you choose, and it depends on which trip you're going on. But that is the range of features and technology that are built into these types of boots, and hopefully you'll be able to apply that in your outdoor recreation activities. See you next time.